Okay, hi guys. Good morning. Welcome back. It's Tuesday, April 6th, and we'll be starting in like 3 minutes. It's about 3 minutes till 10 a.m. So, hope you guys had a great spring break and staying safe and healthy and all that. And yeah, good to be with you guys. So, just get comfortable, and we'll be starting in a few. At any point, as usual, feel free to say hi or leave behind any kind of comments. Hi, Jocelyn, Naaman, Katan, good to see you guys. Hi, Janice, Jesus, Jason, Leo, Brittany. How was your spring break? Hopefully you got to chill and get in some rest at least. Hi, Kenny, Mia, Alexis, Stephanie. Good to see you guys. Sebastian. Morning, Justin. So now, since Saturday, I got the second dose of the Pfizer vaccine, so now I'm fully vaccinated. That's nice, I guess. It's peace of mind when you're walking around and stuff. You kind of don't realize how much, just almost subconsciously over the past year, at least in my case, that you've been like a little bit hesitant to be close to people that you pass on the street or something. You're always worried about exposure to this deadly virus. But now that I'm fully vaccinated, it's a whole new world. I mean, yeah, like they say 100% of people that get the vaccine do not die or go to the hospital from COVID. So, I mean, for all practical purposes, I can kind of put that to rest. Hopefully a lot of us all get vaccinated so we can have some kind of return to normalcy in the fall. But anyway, just throwing out some random stuff. That's one thing that I did over the break. A lot of grading aside from that, as you guys probably know. But the show goes on, and it's good to be back. Just another minute or so, and then we'll get started. Good to see everybody. I see you guys in the chat. Cameron, Kevin, Melanie, Gloria, Angel, everybody, good to see you guys. Sheely, welcome back. Naomi. Good morning, Alessandra. Another place where I teach, okay, you guys, you probably have heard of Chapman University over in Orange. They are so like gung-ho to get us back in the classroom. So in that case, I'm actually already back. They're asking me to come to the room, and we're doing like this hybrid in-person thing where like a couple students are in the classroom, and then I'm also live streaming to all the ones that are at home watching. That's very strange. I kind of prefer this format, to be honest with you. To me, you can't really split the difference. It's all or nothing. You're either all the way in person or you're all the way remote. But trying to do half and half is very weird because like you're live streaming, like I'm talking to the camera like I am now, but then there's like 3 or 4 students behind me, behind the laptop. So it's kind of divides your attention between 2 set of people. That's a little strange. But just letting you know that like as of last week with Chapman anyway, they've returned to partial in-person instruction. So I'm kind of getting my feet wet, dipping them back in the water a little bit with some type of in-person instruction over there. But now that I'm fully vaccinated, it doesn't really bother me that much. Even though they don't have a policy which requires us to be vaccinated before we come back, but thankfully I was able to take care of it on my own. But anyway, guys, okay, so welcome back. Good to see everybody. Let me say a few things. Did some of you happen to notice this morning I sent off a message? I sent through Titanium just a little announcement notifying you guys of the midterm grades that are all done. Can you tell me if you got that? I think you did because I've received a few requests already since then. But I would just open the meeting with that just as a little point of order. So as we departed for spring break, you guys had just taken your midterm. You had one lecture after that, but pretty much then you went away to your spring break. And I took the time during spring break to grade a lot. So I've finished those midterms, and I'm ready to return the scores to any of those students. But all you have to do for your score is just send me an email. And once you do, you're in line, and I'll give you your reply with detailed comments within 2 days since you sent it to me. So if you sent me your request today, I'll do my best to get back to you for sure. If not tomorrow, then at the latest Thursday. So go ahead and do send me those score and grade requests if you like, and then I'll get right back to you. I like to do it individually like this. I like for there to be a little bit of a personal touch, and I can communicate with you also about whatever errors you might have made. So that's my request, that you just send me a line, send me a little message, and when you do, then I'll be ready to reply back to you with your grade. But it could take me up to 48 hours. I said that in the message too, and the reason for that is just because of all the different classes that I have and all the other students that I'm also teaching. So just give me a little margin of time, but not to worry, I'll certainly get back to you. It's the same kind of thing as we had with Essay 1. When that was finished, students would contact me. I would send them back their grade with written comments. So anyway, we've moved on now from that part of the class. We still retain all the knowledge, and we might need it for later on when we take the final. But for now, we've done one essay and one exam. So we're halfway through. And the remainder of the class that we finish from here is just going to basically do the same thing again. We have another essay that I'll assign in a couple of weeks, and then there will be the final exam. So as you guys know, based on our syllabus from day one, there's 2 essays and 2 tests. So you did one of each so far. Okay, so if that's all clear and good, then I'm just going to go back into our lecture topic of today, and that is all about epistemology. So to begin the class, as we know, we started off talking about philosophy of religion, arguments considering whether God exists or not. Then we looked at the world of ethics, moral philosophy, the concept of moral and immoral, right, wrong, and what are some ethical theories that have been developed that try to give a sense of what's right and wrong. Then we looked at some applied ethical problems like the issue of economic inequality across the globe and the trolley problem. Then we took the exam, and then after the exam, we just briefly launched into this new topic. Kind of unfortunate timing in a way, but that's just how the dates lined up. But we started into that new topic right before we went away for break. Now, since we've been apart for about 12 days, I'm going to take the first part of today's meeting to kind of revive your memory a little bit about some of those concepts that we were learning on the previous Thursday before we went away for holiday. So let's try and remember some of these things. We're now studying epistemology, okay? This is our current topic. And so let me ask a few questions, and with your help, we'll start this little review, and then we'll launch into more material as soon as we're done. What do you think epistemology means, or what does this word refer to? What topic is the topic of epistemology, in other words? Someone maybe will know this, and then that'll be our kind of starting point. So epistemology, what is it? What's this fancy word mean? Very good, yes, it is the theoretical study of knowledge. So it's the study of knowledge and concepts that have to do with knowledge. Things like, what is it to know something? What is the definition of knowledge? What's the difference between really knowing something and just having a wild guess that turns out to be correct? So people are interested in this concept. It's a core topic for human beings. We have a lot of knowledge about things big and small, but in a sort of meta sense, we'd like to know what it is when we have knowledge. Like, what is the concept of having knowledge? So to get that discussion underway, we had to first review some material from the ancient Greeks, and I'm going to talk more about those ancient Greeks today, but a substantial portion of the previous meeting was just to kind of clue you in on some of the historical facts about the life and the events of Socrates' life. So Socrates was this ancient Greek philosopher, perhaps one of the founding fathers of the whole field. We're talking about a man that lived 400 years before the Common Era, so relative to today, that's over 2,400 years ago. He lived in Athens. He was like a witty and brilliant orator and conversationalist, and he had this skill of changing people's ideas or opinions on important topics when they would discuss topics with him. And that caused him to become a minor celebrity in Athens, well known to the people there, and he had a following of young guys that thought he was really cool, the way that he would challenge people's traditional assumptions. But in some quarters of the Athenian government, he was not liked. They thought that he was somehow subversive, or that he might threaten to cause these young people that he was influencing to disobey their parents or not believe in the Greek gods. So they said to him, you're going to have to stop doing philosophy or we'll arrest you. He didn't stop because he knew that he wasn't doing anything wrong. So then they arrested him, put him on trial. At trial, he was convicted of corrupting the youth. And then they executed him by poisoning. So that's how his life ended. But Plato was one of his students, and he carried the torch forward for philosophy and for Greek knowledge. So anyway, then, the writings of Plato contain a lot of lessons from his teacher Socrates. Some of us are not sure how much of that Socrates within these writings is the real Socrates, or how much of it is the invention of his student Plato. But in one of the dialogues written by Plato, we learn the ancient Greek account of knowledge. Now, as I'm going to speak about that dialogue in a moment, I first want to remind us all about the important vocabulary items that we looked at having to do with epistemology. So like an initial vocabulary that you would want to have includes some important words. So let's just review these if we can, guys. One question I have is this: what's the term proposition refer to? What is a proposition? Who can tell me that? So definition or explanation of the term proposition. What is it? In the philosophical sense. Not like a proposition, like an offer, like I've got a proposition for you. Write my paper, I'll give you 20 bucks. No, not like that. Okay, very good. Yes, the meaning of a sentence. Correct. So this is not to be confused with the sentence itself. And the reason for that is because it is possible for there to be multiple sentences which convey the same meaning, and therefore they are the same proposition, even if they're worded differently, okay, or even if they're in different languages. One example I gave you was take these two sentences. One in English, the snow is white. The other in German, der Schnee ist weiß. These two sentences contain the same information. They have the same content, even though they sound a little different and they look different, you know, if you're writing them out in letters. So that just shows the point that the information that we express with our sounds or symbols can be expressed with divergent or diverse symbols or sounds and still convey the same information. Okay, and we started with that because it is propositions that are the objects of our knowledge. It is a proposition that we say that you either know or do not know. Take the proposition that God exists. This is a proposition that maybe some argue we know, others may say it's not known. That the earth is round is a proposition that I believe we all know. So anyway, propositions, the meaning of sentences, the objects of human knowledge. Next up, what is it for a proposition to be true? Let me know about that. To have a true proposition or statement means what? Like, and while you're thinking or typing, as an example, one true statement is that I'm wearing a watch. But a false statement is that I'm wearing a hat. So you can see here two examples. One statement is true, one isn't. That might help you to remember what is the definition of a sentence being true. So what does it take for a sentence to be a true sentence? Let me know. For a sentence or a proposition to be true, what does this mean? I had you with proposition. I know, and I don't want to lose you on truth. This is big. So what is truth? If you can't remember from your notes, then just think about it and tell me what you think the word truth means. Okay? I know you've got thoughts, if not notes. So what is truth? What is a true sentence? Okay, yeah, that's right. Good, Kobe. When what the sentence says matches the actual facts of reality, then that is a true proposition or sentence. So can someone say something true? Well, type something true. Type out a true sentence in this chat. It should be easy because there's a lot of facts. There's a lot of just true stuff. Some of them, you know, you can just look right around you and see, but it might not be easy for me to verify them because I'm not where you're at. So what is something that's true? 2 + 2 is 4. Okay, Brandon, I like that, but it's a little bit of a trippy example because it's all about math. And, you know, what's the corresponding fact and reality to the mathematical statement? Like sets of sets that have the cardinality of 2 when doubled amount to 4. I mean, yeah, you could say that there's a corresponding fact, but it's just a little trippy. So I would have thought something a little more straightforward, like you say I'm wearing glasses. That's true, Alessandra. Yes, I am. Water's a liquid. Also true, but I mean, it can be a solid and it can be a gas, depending on the temperature condition of the environment. But anyway, yes. You're wearing a black t-shirt, Jason, is that the fact? Okay, nice to know. How about something that's out there in the world that doesn't have to do with me, your professor, or you, the student. Like just a worldly fact. These are all good examples for the most part. You say, Kobe, we're on YouTube. True enough. Fact. All humans die. Sad fact, I guess. But, you know, we haven't died yet. So you're talking about all the other humans so far in the past. Maybe we'll be that generation that finds the solution to the mystery of eternal life. But anyway, I guess what you're saying is you don't think that can happen. I don't know, though. I mean, is there any finite time span that we say is the absolute limit of human life? It seems like it's indefinitely extensive. But anyway, fair enough. The sky's blue, okay. It's nighttime on the other side of the globe, also true. The earth goes around the sun, great. Okay, all these are good. So just checking that we have the right understanding. So, okay, taking stock. Proposition, the meaning of a sentence. Truth, when a proposition says something that matches the facts of reality. So a sentence is just something said, but reality is the set of facts. So if I say to a person, that I have $1 million in my bank account, I'm lying, this is not true of me, at least not right now, then I would be saying a false statement. It's a statement, but if you looked at the account, it doesn't match what I said. So when something is written or said which is true, it corresponds to the facts of reality. And if the reality facts are different than the statement, then it's a falsehood. Okay, so next up, what does the word belief refer to? In order for a subject to believe a proposition, what does that mean? What is a belief? To believe a statement or sentence, or we could call it proposition. What is that? What is a belief? Okay, good, Kobe, and also Naaman, yes. When a person thinks that a sentence is true, okay? So that's up to the individual's judgment, I guess. Take two people like that disagree about masking or something. I mean, that's a sad thing. We should all be able to follow guidance from our public health agencies and our scientific experts. But of course, there's some that don't want to do that. And there may be some people that are finding their own information and trying to like read into it and go down a rabbit hole, you know. But anyway, some person might say, I think masks actually don't prevent the transmission of a virus. Another person, perhaps better informed, who says, I believe they do. So these two people take the statement that masks prevent transmission of virus. One person says, I think that's really the case. And the other person doesn't think so. So we can have our different beliefs and we can have different opinions. But in case we have these different views, we can't both be correct. You know, if I think that my partner cheated and someone else doesn't, we cannot both be correct. These beliefs, you know, it's not like they did and they didn't. So that we're both right. So in any case, or suppose I believe someone's pregnant and someone else says, I don't think they're pregnant. We can't both be correct. It can't be like, well, they are and they are not. It's just one or the other. So that's how beliefs are. Beliefs are when you think something is corresponding to the facts, but it's possible for beliefs to be incorrect. On the other hand, facts, being what they are objectively true. Okay, so then a couple more things briefly. What's justification? To have a justified belief. What is that? To say that a belief is justified as opposed to being unjustified. What gives a belief the status of being a justified one? And that's also good. Thanks, Kobe. So it is when you have good evidence or reasons to support your own belief. So like if you could say reasons in favor of the claim that you think is true, then you've got justification. So if I say to the person, hey, you cheated on me, and they're like, why do you think that? I'd be like, okay, well, look, I was going through your phone. What are all these texts? These texts seem like you're flirting with a person. That's my evidence. So I'm justified in the belief that you're cheating or whatever, you know? So justification is just having reasons that you could offer in defense of the belief that you think is true. If I was to tell you that the earth is round and you say to me, why? I would definitely have answers for you. I would say, okay, well, think about this. As you know, we're not all bathed in sunlight on the globe at the same time. Well, I shouldn't say globe because that begs the question. On this planet, some people are in darkness and other people are in light. If the planet was not a globe, but rather a disk, there'd be no way to account for that because it would all be exposed to the same source of light at the same time. Only on the hypothesis that it is a sphere which is turning can we account for the fact that some regions of it show light and others don't. But, you know, that would be evidence and reasoning to support the claim that it's round. And I could also say there's photographic evidence. Have you ever looked at photos taken of the Earth from satellites or from the surface of the moon? They show that it's a sphere. That's more evidence I could give. So I'm picking on this one arbitrary example, but as you know, this generalizes across the board. When you have justification for whatever the claim is or belief is, you got some set of reasons or evidences that you provide or could provide to shore it up and show that you think it's true. Okay, and then one more thing. Did we talk about epistemic agent? I think we did. Can anybody tell me what is an epistemic agent? And then that ends the review of those vocabulary terms that I wanted us to go through. What's that, if we know? Epistemic agent. Maybe I didn't talk about it, but if so, let me know. Oh, no, good. You've got it already then. Good. Thank you, Kobe. So an epistemic agent is just some existing thing, you use the word being, a being that is capable of having beliefs or knowledge, that is able to, right? So like this sweater that's on my body is not an epistemic agent. It's a nice sweater, comfortable for me, but it can't think, it can't judge, it can't perceive. The sweater has no opinions, it has no views, it has no perception of anything, obviously, because it's not a living thing, it's an inanimate object. And most things in the universe are, if you really think about it, except for on this one planet Earth, as far as we know, it's all just unthinking, unconscious matter. But when you have living things, especially human beings, we of course process information, and we're subjects that take a point of view on the world. So we are things that are epistemic agents, unlike the sweater or the table or chair. And maybe there are other epistemic agents aside from humans. Some examples could include non-human animals, other types of life forms on the planet Earth, and if there are such things, maybe out there far in the distant universe, other things that are also capable of forming judgments. Okay, so then, from there, the point that we raised is that according to ancient Greeks, the definition of knowledge, and not just according to them, but really for thousands of years afterward, this analysis of knowledge remained the dominant view, that knowledge is equal to justified true belief. And maybe stated a little more briefly, K, abbreviating knowledge, is equivalent to the acronym JTB, where the initials JTB just each stand for one of those 3 points in the definition. And as we were closing class last time, I was just trying to give you intuitions supporting this definition by raising examples. Like one, I think, easy example would be to consider how it is not knowledge if any single of those conditions is failed or not met. So suppose a student has taken a multiple choice test and they fill in the wrong bubble. You already know, based on them giving the wrong answer, that they don't get credited for knowing the answer. That illustrates a very obvious point, that you cannot be claimed as knowing something when what you believe is false. So if you were asked who was the 44th president of the United States, and you said, filled in the bubble which says Donald Trump, you'd get the answer wrong because the 44th president was Barack Obama, right? No one would say you knew the answer to that question if you gave the wrong information in response. That would be where your believed answer is not true. And we can also see that the true answer, the Barack Obama, I guess if you didn't fill that out, then you didn't believe at that time that that was the correct answer. So not only did you have a false belief with respect to the answer you gave, but with respect to the correct answer, you didn't believe that it was the right one. So you failed the belief condition concerning the true answer, and you failed the truth condition concerning your actual answer. So that's not knowledge. But we can also see that if you had filled in the right bubble, but just out of a random guess, that would also not be true knowledge. That would be getting the answer right, so I guess you would be happy in that case. But it would not be because you actually understood the reasons or explanations behind why it is correct. So knowledge then requires not just a lucky guess that ended up being true, but rather a belief, which is true. So you think something's true, and it is correct, and also you have access to reasons that you could give as to why that is true. Okay. Now, this finally allows us to jump into that writing of Plato called the Meno. So I'm going to make short work of it, but we still have to talk about a few things there. So Plato is our author, and as I was saying before, he lived a long time ago, from 428 BC until 347 BC. So when he died, still 347 years until Jesus would be born. So this is a very ancient time period in world history. The dialogue that we are going to analyze, it's called the Meno. And that's in our book on page 343 and 344, as you would know. It's a very short dialogue, so I can actually pretty much read the whole thing to you as we discuss it. And that's what I will do. I'll just go through it piece by piece. And whenever we have to take a little sidebar to discuss something that's in there, I'll do that. Now, first, why is it called the Meno? It's called the Meno just because there's a discussion happening here between Socrates, the great teacher of Plato, and then this Greek general whose name was Meno. So since he's talking to Meno, Plato just titled the piece the Meno. And here's how it starts off. Well, again, just a reminder, they're talking about the concept of knowledge between the two of them, Socrates and Meno, and they're discussing what the right definition is. So Socrates starts off with this question that he asks Meno. He says, hey, Meno, okay, a man who knew the way to Larissa or anywhere else that you like and went there and guided others would surely lead them well and correctly? ? And Meno says, certainly, Socrates. So let me break that down for you and tell you what's happening. The question that Socrates is asking is about this city that's about 100 miles away from Athens, where Socrates lives. And Meno is from Larissa. That's his birthplace. So that's why Socrates mentions it to him, because he knows that it's a familiar destination to Meno. So here's the name of that city, Larissa. So Larissa, again, is a different city within Greece, about 100 miles distant from Athens. And here's the question then, now that we've made that clear. Socrates is asking Meno, hey, if someone knew how to get to Larissa, and they've been there many times because they made this journey, they know the route by heart, knowing how to get there, couldn't they lead other people there as well that have never been there before? Couldn't they correctly lead them to the destination if they have knowledge formed from a lot of experience taking the journey? And Meno says yes. So does that make sense? It's a simple question in a way. It's like if a person knows how to get to like some destination and they know the route by heart very well, then couldn't they lead a new person that's never been there to the same destination and get there correctly? And the answer given is yes. Now he uses the example of Larissa because they're in Greece and it's familiar to Meno. But to be relatable to you, I mean, I don't know. Some of you guys probably, I don't know, have maybe not even visited Cal State Fullerton because it's all been, locked down and stuff since we've been on the pandemic. But question, okay, you're kind of Meno right now and I'm Socrates. Well, with a slight twist. Do you know how to get to Fullerton from wherever you're watching this video? Meaning like Cal State Fullerton. Do you know how to get to campus? Like, do you know the route? If I told you, not me, but if you were told, go to Cal State Fullerton right now, would you know how to get there without having to use a map or anything? Question, just let me see some of your responses. I know there's a lot of different students and it's not going to be perhaps a universal answer, but I'm wondering if this is something that maybe is, okay, you're saying with GPS, Kobe, and Stephanie, you say no. So already it's not familiar enough for you guys to make this the right example. Okay, sad to say, when we used to all be face-to-face, this is such an easy part of the lecture to give because we'd all be in a classroom together. And I could just say to the students there, hey, do you guys know how to get to like your apartment or wherever you sleep at night from this classroom? And in that case, everyone has to say yes. So let me think then, okay. You're at your house, I suppose, right? Maybe most of you are probably at home. Let me ask you this then. If you were at the local shopping mall nearby to where you live, would you know how to get back to your house without using any kind of assistance? I'm hoping to find an example of some place that you do know how to get to by heart. Now, I guess school is not really that right now. But surely you know how to get to your own house, right? No matter if you were like in some local place in your community. Okay, good. So let's go with that example. It's kind of like what Socrates is asking Meno here. If a person knows how to get to a particular place, it doesn't need to be Larissa, but in his example it is. If a person knows how to get to a particular location, then couldn't they lead other people there? Yes. So suppose that in the fall classes resume and we're in face-to-face, and you guys are starting to get that college experience, being on the physical campus, meeting other students and hanging out and, socializing. Suppose you make a friend, and I'm sure you probably will once this is all over, and you're out in the world. And you want to like hang out with the person. So you say, do you want to chill, like play video games or just watch videos or something? Come through to my pad. And if you say that to the person, clearly you could lead this person that's never been to your place to that place because you would know how to get there from wherever you're at. Like in this case, I'm assuming school. Okay, so perhaps I've overcomplicated it a bit, but I didn't want to. It's just a question. If you know how to get to point B from point A, then couldn't you lead someone to point B even if they've never been there? And the answer is yes. Okay, so next question then from there. Socrates says, okay, Meno, but what if someone had a correct opinion as to which was the way, but had not gone there, nor indeed had knowledge of it? Wouldn't he also lead correctly? And Meno again says, yes, certainly, Socrates. So this is a second, slightly different question. Now what he asks him is this. Let me change the example, Meno. What if a person's never been there at all to Larissa? They've never been there, so they don't know actually how to get there. They don't know the route by heart. They don't know how to get there from their own knowledge and experience of the past. But suppose they have he calls it correct opinion as to which is the way. Wouldn't that also be able to lead you there? And Meno again says yes. So let me explain to you what he's saying here. The terms that he's using when he says correct opinion. And Socrates uses that phrase, correct opinion. I'm going to tell you that stands for 2 out of the 3 parts of the definition of knowledge. So just using your own common sense and awareness of our language, what of the 2 pieces of the knowledge definition do you think this corresponds to? Correct opinion is synonymous with what within the definition of knowledge. So can you associate those 2 words with 2 of the words that are found in the classical definition of knowledge? What do you think that would be? Correct opinion stands for what then? Let's get that out there. A correct opinion expressed in the terminology of the knowledge definition is which 2 of the criteria? No, Naaman, that's not it. You have half of it, but not the other half. So you got 1 of the 2. Let's try again. I don't want to spoil the assessment by just telling you too early, but I will say this, you got half of that correct, but not the other half. So correct opinion. Naaman, you're on the right lines though. Yeah, true belief, that's right. Truth, not justification, because correct just means that you got it right. And opinion just means you think so. But a correct opinion is not justified, okay? It's a true belief without justification, Angel and Naaman. So that's the idea here. Correct opinion. A true belief without justification. So Socrates here is trying to distinguish 2 possible states. You could have knowledge of the destination, or you could just have a true opinion about it, but you've never really done it yourself. Now this correct opinion thing, but not knowledge. It's kind of like just having a random guess that you don't have enough facts and evidence to say you know. Like suppose I'm telling you right now that I like the idea that there's aliens in space somewhere, like another extraterrestrial life form. Maybe I'm right, because it's a big universe, and after all, we live on this planet, so maybe it could have happened somewhere else too. But do you really think that I know that there's extraterrestrial aliens out there? No, it's an opinion, and it might be correct. But without better evidence, I cannot say that I really know this for a fact. When could I know it? It would stop being an opinion if I had great evidence. If the Mars rover starts beaming back images of little life forms on the Mars surface, then I would say this takes it out of the realm of speculation. And I had an opinion about it before, and I guess my opinion was correct that whole time, but now I actually know it because now there's evidence. So that's the second question. Socrates asks Meno, what if someone didn't know how to get there? They've never gone, so they don't know how to get to Larissa, but they do have a correct opinion as to the way. Wouldn't that also work? And Meno says yes. So now I want to kind of connect some of the comments that you guys just made with what I'm saying here. In our modern day, when you want to get somewhere, and you don't necessarily know how to get there because you've never traveled there before, what kind of assistance might you use to help ensure that you get there correctly? Some of you have already said this, so let me see you say it again. What kind of method or tool might a person use in the year 2021 to correctly arrive at a destination they've never been to before? What do you think would be the tool there? Right, okay, GPS. You say asking locals, Kobe, but that's not necessarily a modern method. That's something that you could have done even back in the ancient world. So I'm talking about like using an accurate navigation system, a GPS, global positioning satellite service like Google Maps or Apple Maps if you use that. I think Google Maps is better. But anyway, now if you have an accurate map, won't that allow you to get to the correct destination just as much as the person who needs no map because they know the route completely by heart? And again, Mino says yes. In their world, they didn't have GPS, but they had maps. And so you can imagine him thinking, what if someone has a map that's true and correct, but they've never used it and they never actually traveled based on the map to the destination? Still, though, if it's correct in its instructions, then wouldn't that be just as well as the knowledge in getting you there? And Mino says yes. So let me read on. Then Socrates says, and as long as he has the right opinion about that of which the other has knowledge, he will not be a worse guide than the one who knows, since he has a true opinion, even if it is not knowledge. And Mino says, in no way will it be worse. So continuing from there, Socrates asks the next question. So Mino, correct opinion is no less useful than knowledge? Question he's asking is this. So does that mean that there's nothing better about having knowledge versus just a correct opinion? They both get you to the destination, same end goal, same end result. So there's nothing more useful about the knowledge? And Mino says, well, to that extent, Socrates, but, okay, now let me pause for a moment while I try and open the discussion a little. What Mino's going to say next is this. He's being challenged by Socrates to say, why would it be better to know the route versus just having the map that works? And I'll throw that question to you. Can you tell me, is there any extra advantage that comes with knowing how to get to a place by heart? Because you've gone there, many times. And so you just know, you completely know the route. It's totally memorized and familiar to you. Is there any benefit in having that knowledge as opposed to having to rely on the GPS system or map? Okay, so Kobe, you say you don't need to stop and figure out how to get there. That's, I guess, a fair point, right? So as you guys know, hi Peachy, as you guys know, when you're relying on a map, even if it's correct, if you've never used it to get to the place before, then you might not always be able to associate the turn-by-turn directions of the map with what's happening in your environment because you have never seen that environment. So if it says like exit on Old Town Road or something, and the sign for Old Town Road is covered or obscured or knocked down, if you've never made the journey before, then you might get lost along the way because you can't connect what the map is saying with what's going on in your environment. So it seems like if you've been there many times and you just know the route by heart, then you'll always make it there and you'll never get lost along the way. But the person who has the map, even though it's a good map and it works, they might not trust it at times. They might not be able to connect it to the available signage that is in the environment. And so he argues, Mino does, that it's better to know, even though the map will get you there, it's better to really know because you'll always make it there and your knowledge is more reliable. You also know all these alternate routes in case there's some kind of road closure or whatever. And let me see how your comments compare to that. So Kobe, you said you don't need to stop and figure out, right? Naaman, you can make a detour if needed, also true. Brandon, you'll know that it's actually right and there's a chance the map could be wrong. And that's, I think, very important, yes. You'd be able to trust it with good reason because you'd be able to say, I know this is correct since I've used it before. Janice, you say faster, perhaps faster, although there's a bigger issue, I think, fundamentally about the possibility of getting lost on the way. Jerry, you know, shortcuts, maybe get there faster, same point. And Kobe, like the second nature, you can get there more quickly. Okay. So that's all I think reasonable. Here's how Mino said it, okay? So in response to Socrates' question, Mino throws this out there. He says, well, that's true to an extent, Socrates, but the man who has knowledge will always succeed, whereas he who has true opinion will only succeed sometimes. Now, Socrates kind of doesn't let him have that. He sort of presses him on the point a little, and he asks this next. He says, well, what do you mean, though? Won't he who has the right opinion always succeed as long as the opinion is right? You know, as long as the map works, won't that always work just as well as knowledge? And now Mino is ready to sort of concede, and he says, I don't know, that does appear to be true. And now you're making me wonder, Socrates, if that's true, why is knowledge valued so much more than the correct opinion, and why are they different? And so now what Socrates says is that he's going to finally, you know, tell Mino the answer as to why knowledge is more valuable than a correct opinion. So he's going to say, you want to know? I'll tell you. And that's what he says. He says, do you know why you're wondering, or should I tell you? And Mino says, by all means, tell me. So Socrates continues. It is because you have paid no attention to the statues of Daedalus. But maybe there are none in Thessaly. Thessaly is where Meno currently lives. It's a city where he lives. So he says, maybe you've paid no attention to the statues of Daedalus. Did they not have those in Thessaly? Okay, now let me explain. What he's talking about here is this famous sculptor of ancient Greece, and his name was Daedalus. So the name is D-A-E-D-A-L-U-S, Daedalus. And Daedalus was such an amazing sculptor. He crafted these amazing, realistic, lifelike, like photorealistic sculptures, three-dimensional of human figures. And since he was the best and most skilled craftsman of sculpture in the land, he acquired this kind of mythical reputation. What people thought about his sculptures was that if you were able to acquire one of these priceless Daedalus sculptures, then you should probably make sure to attach it to the ground with ropes. They thought that these lifelike Daedalus sculptures were so realistic and human-like that if you got one and you did not tether it into the ground with ropes, then the myth and the cultural superstition was that when you were not looking, maybe sleeping or turning a blind eye to it, if these sculptures were not fastened and secured by ropes to the ground, then they would probably just what when you weren't looking? What do you think this myth was, believed by some ancient Greeks? Daedalus sculptures, best sculptures ever, so realistic. If you can get one, you better tie it down with ropes. Why would that be the advice? Because of their belief that they would walk away, yes, that they would get up and run off. Yeah, well, grabbing you, I can see why you might think, Jerry, but they were focused more on the thought that they'll escape from your property and then you won't be able to keep them. So here's the point he's making. These sculptures are beautiful whether they're based with ropes or not. Same sculpture, same beauty, but wouldn't you rather have those ropes attaching it to the ground, because now the same beautiful sculpture gets to stay with you and you get to maintain possession of it. It won't escape from your property or from your possession. And now this is like a metaphor which Socrates is trying to use. He says these ropes that lock down the statues and keep them from moving away, they're kind of symbolic of the role that justification has in preventing your true beliefs from escaping your mind. Okay? So he thinks that knowledge is more valuable than just a correct opinion because it adds this extra ingredient of justification to the mix. And justification, he says, prevents a true belief from leaving your mind, just how these ropes prevent what? The statues from physically leaving your property. So it's an analogy, everyone. The ropes stand to the statues as what stands to what? Can you complete that analogy? I gave you half of it. So the ropes stand in the relation to those statues as what thing stands in the relation to what other thing. That is the basis of his whole discussion and analysis here. Ropes are compared with what? The ropes are a symbol, a metaphor for justification, correct? And Kobe, almost but not quite. You got the second part of the analogy there, not so exactly correct. Because knowledge contains justification. So justification as it stands in relation to, what does the untied statue stand for? Okay, let me ask you that. The statue which does not have ropes. No, you had the justification part right. The knowledge part is the second part that was wrong. So your second answer is actually worse because you took out the correct part. Now it's just the incorrect part. So the statues that do not have any ropes attaching them would be symbolic of what? Applied to the definition of knowledge. So the different component parts. The ropes are the justification, true, yes. But the statue without any ropes on it is supposed to be, yeah, correct opinion, Janice. So the beautiful statues are like the true beliefs that you have. And they're great for as long as you have them. But they will not stay for long unless they are based on something. The statues won't stay for long unless they're literally based in the ground with ropes, unless they're grounded with ropes. And your true beliefs, your correct opinions, it's nice that you have them. Like say you were that student that just happened to guess the right question or the right answer, I should say, on a multiple choice test. Aren't you happy that you got the right answer? Sure. But you're not going to know that same information if it was asked to you a year later or whatever, because you don't retain information that you don't have evidence or justification for. So what kind of student would not just fill in the right answer on the day of the test, but would also do that in a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, throughout their whole life? The person who knows the answer because they have detailed justification when they fill the bubble in. So knowledge is more valuable than a correct opinion, Socrates says, because it's more stable. The justification adds the stability to it so that it won't escape your mind, and you won't either forget it or change your mind about it. But when you have correct opinions that you have no reason to have, like you have no evidence for them, then you can change your mind about that, or you could just forget it. And that kind of stuff doesn't stay in your mind. So justification adds the security and stability to the beliefs, preventing them from leaving, just how the ropes add security and stability to the statues and prevent them from leaving. So now I'll read it in the words of the man Socrates. So he says this: "Do you know why you're wondering, Meno, or should I tell you?" Meno says, "By all means, tell me." Okay, so Socrates then says, "It's because you pay no attention to the statues of Daedalus, but perhaps there are none in Thessaly." Meno just bluntly says, "What do you mean when you say that?" Socrates says, "Well, they too run away and escape if one does not tie them down, but they remain in place if they are tied down." And Meno says, "So what?" Socrates says, "Okay, well, to acquire an untied work of Daedalus with no ropes is not worth much. It's like acquiring a runaway slave because it will not remain in place. But it is worth much if it is tied down because his works are very beautiful." What am I thinking when I say this? True opinions. Because true opinions, as long as you have them, are a fine thing, and all they do is good, but they are not willing to remain long, and they will escape from a man's mind. So they are not worth much until you tie them down by giving an account of the reason why. And that is as we previously agreed. After they are tied down, in the first place they become knowledge, and then they remain in place. That is why knowledge is valued more than correct opinion, and knowledge differs from correct opinion because it is tied down. And Meno says, "Yes, by Zeus, Socrates, it seems to be something like that." It's the equivalent in ancient Greece of, yes, by God, that's true, because Zeus is like the main god in the pantheon of Greek gods. And Socrates finishes by saying, "Indeed, I too speak as one who does not have knowledge but is guessing. However, I certainly don't think I'm guessing that right opinion is different from knowledge. If I claim to know anything else, and I would make that claim about few things, I would put this down as one of the things that I do know." Rightly so, Socrates, and that's how it ends. So what Socrates is saying is that justification is a key ingredient in that three-part definition of knowledge, because it is that piece which upgrades its status from just a mere correct opinion to something that is knowledge. Justification transforms your correct view to something that you actually know, and it adds the stability that comes with having access to the reasons. I've talked about the belief of whether there's aliens in outer space a few times, just to use an example. And I believe that there are, but I don't really know that there are. And my opinion on the question could change 100 times in a given year, depending on how I feel. Today I might say I love the idea that we're not alone in the universe, but maybe in a week or something, I watch like a really dark film and I'm starting to feel nihilistic, and I'm like, you know what? It's lucky that there's even life on one planet. Can you believe life ever emerged? It's probably nowhere else. And so I might keep changing my mind on the opinion, but I would stop changing my mind permanently if I got evidence that conclusively established that there was such life. At that point, it's not a speculation anymore, and the evidence would make sure that I don't have any reason to change my views any longer. So evidence, justification, however you want to put it, is the thing that adds that stability and base to the correct opinion. So they stay in your mind, they remain in your belief system, and you get to hold on to them. And when we talk about justified beliefs in everyday speech, if we ever do, we often employ linguistic metaphors that kind of recall to mind the example Socrates gives of these ropes. So what do you say when you have a belief that's really, really solid based on stuff? Well, even that, it's well-based. My belief is based on a lot of evidence. Based. A statue that's tied to the ground with ropes is based into the ground with the ropes. Sometimes we say that our beliefs are grounded on a lot of facts. I have very good, solid grounds for my belief. I have extensively detailed grounds for what I believe. Well, your belief is grounded on evidence, and the statues are physically grounded with ropes. So we kind of see that there's some metaphors employed, even in the way we talk about justification, that has to do with security, stability, and basing things. Okay, so there we go. I've talked to you guys about the dialogue of the Meno, which gives us a window into the ancient Greek definition of knowledge, justified true belief. And that analysis of knowledge remained the consensus view for thousands and thousands of years until, fast forward, to 1963, when an American philosopher named Edmund Gettier wrote this short paper, literally like 2 pages, but that paper is considered revolutionary because it, within a few pages, shows by means of a couple examples that long-standing classical Greek definition of knowledge is not quite correct. And that's very almost disturbing. Living since 1963, the world is kind of in what we call the post-Gettier era, meaning that ever since his classic paper, we no longer think that we have quite a handle on what knowledge is any longer. At this point, it's like it's justified true belief plus question mark, something else, but no one can quite agree on what this additional condition is supposed to be. And it's really Gettier that everyone credits with exposing some flaws and gaps in that ancient definition of knowledge. So that's what we're going to look at now. Here's the author's name. His name is Edmund Gettier. Edmund Gettier, and he was born in 1927, born on Halloween, actually, October 31st, and he's still alive. So he's one of the living legends of Western philosophy, still out there. His paper from 1963 is called, it's a question, the title. The title is Justified True Belief Knowledge? Question mark. Like, is it though? That's what the Greeks said, but is it? And spoiler alert, by the time the essay is done, the answer he gives is no. It's basically not the right definition or analysis of the concept. So we're going to have to really get through his cases. The Gettier cases are famous. They show examples of individuals who have a justified true belief but still don't have knowledge. And that throws off the definition. It basically shows that this is possible, that you can have JTB, which is not knowledge, not equivalent to K. And if that is so, then that's a counterexample. The Greeks thought that every time someone has a justified true belief, boom, that's knowledge. Gettier is trying to show us that no, there are possible situations where a person can have a justified true belief and still it's not enough for knowledge. So that shows us that there's something missing in this definition that has to be added, and that's where we still don't have that missing piece. There's a lot of various reformulations of the concept of knowledge since Gettier, but the field hasn't been able to exactly agree on one core definition that doesn't have any kind of objections to it. So, I mean, that's a bit of a weird thought, right? That we don't even know what knowledge is really anymore. And even saying that sounds like a contradiction in terms, because if we say we don't know what knowledge is, then what is it that we don't have? If we don't know what knowledge is, then it's not even clear what we're saying we don't have when we don't know it. But I digress. So let's get into his examples. To show Gettier's examples, there's a few preliminary points that have to be made first. And well, the first thing he does is he sets forth the definition of knowledge that the Greeks provided, and he just wants to say that in the paper so that the reader understands what it is that he's going to try and criticize. He writes it out 3 different ways. You'll see that on page 345. I want to make clear something. These are not 3 different definitions of knowledge that he's putting there on that page. What he's trying to show you is that in the literature, the one definition, JTB, is sometimes described with different terminology. So what those 3 different examples are on the page there are 3 slightly reworded versions of the same definition, but they're not different. So for example, the classic one at the top says, a subject S knows that P, just in case, 3 things. P is true, S believes that P, and number 3, S is justified in believing that P. So that's the 3. Truth condition T, belief condition B, justification condition J. Another different wording of it, given by another author named Roderick Chisholm, says that a subject S knows that some proposition P, just in case, S accepts P, S has adequate evidence for P, and P is true. Now this wording of the definition is not a different definition, it's just slightly different synonyms. So when it says S accepts P, that's just a slightly different way of saying that the individual believes the statement. To accept the statement as true is to believe it. The second word, S has adequate evidence for P, this is just Chisholm's slightly modified way of saying that the subject S has justification for believing in it. So anyway, in reporting on this, which you may do later if I assign the topic as a paper, don't mistake that there are 3 definitions here. There's one definition which he just says is sometimes expressed in different terms. Okay, so after that, 2 preliminaries. These are just two kind of primary points that he has to raise in order to set up the discussion of his famous examples. Okay, so one of these preliminaries is this point, that it is possible, even if it's not the typical case, it's at least theoretically possible to have a justified false belief. Okay, so usually when your belief is justified, meaning that you've got really good evidence to support it, that increases the likelihood that it's true. That's the only reason that we really want justification, because we want to have true beliefs, and that adds probability to the likelihood that the belief based on the evidence is true. So usually justified beliefs turn out to be true. We follow the evidence and we come to the right conclusions. But it's not always in 100% of cases that justified beliefs are true. So in other words, it's possible in some cases to have a belief that's very well based on evidence. You have every good reason to believe it, but the evidence was misleading or maybe misinterpreted. And therefore, the person who has this justified belief is still not correct. Can any of you guys think of an example, either real or imaginary, where a person could have a justified, but despite that, false belief? Let me see if anyone can throw out an example of that kind, just to make sure it makes sense to you what I'm saying. So what could be a scenario of a justified false belief? You say judge believing in a plaintiff's lies. Okay. And I mean, we can even imagine a more detailed case than that. You can say that the plaintiff is not the only source of evidence. Like, we're not just taking his word for it, but let's suppose that there's other evidence which also supports the plaintiff's claim of innocence. But in fact, they're guilty, and they just have very, very good lawyers that have tried to poke holes in the prosecution's case. That could be a situation in which the judgment that they are not guilty is justified but false. You understand? So that's a good example. And we can also imagine another case. The person believes they're guilty, and there's evidence that indicates this, but actually it was misleading evidence or planted evidence. You guys know for a fact, right, that there have been people convicted at trial by juries. The jury is asked, does this evidence justify the belief in guilt beyond reasonable doubt? And when they vote for guilt, that's what they think the evidence shows. But there have been real cases of convictions being overturned later due to DNA evidence that was later found, which establishes the identity of a whole different attacker or whatever. So in a case like that, the members of the jury that heard the evidence exhibits in court and came to the conclusion of guilt would have had a justified belief in guilt, but it would have been false. As you guys know, we're not infallible gods that can never make errors in judgment. We try our best, but sometimes we, fail to make the right conclusions based on the evidence that we have. So it's possible, isn't it, to have a justified false belief? Now, Brandon, you gave me one example. Come on, there's a lot of other people here. Can anyone else throw another one out there? A justified but false belief. You gave me the case of law. There's also everyday life. Maybe anyone else can throw another example out there. That's a very good one to start with. But I just kind of want to multiply examples. So maybe we have one more. Anything else? Justified false belief. Have you ever believed something that you thought was true and you had reasonable basis for it, but you're like, oh, I was wrong in the end? Surely it can happen. Like, what else? I talked about the cheating partner before. Maybe there could be a innocent explanation for the presence of all this text-based communication with a mysterious other person. Maybe they're actually trying to plan a nice surprise party for the one partner, and it's misinterpreted as like flirtatious side relationship, but it's not really true. Believing something someone says on the internet. Okay, Janice. I mean, I hope that we would check our sources and do a little bit more fact-finding than to just immediately assume that anything posted online is true unless it's given by like credentialed experts. But yeah, I guess that could be another case. Online, sometimes people build entire worlds of false belief based on fabricated evidence. And if you fell into the lure of those kinds of arguments, then you might find yourself having justified false beliefs too. Believing in God and finding out he's real once we die. I don't know, Kobe. That's a controversial case because I can't say that God does or does not exist from my standpoint right here. As we've studied in the class, there are credible arguments for the existence of God as well as objections. So it's an example, I guess, but it's something that I can't assert to be a clear example, since at the end of the day, we can't with total certainty say that that's a false belief. Naaman, thinking dragons are real after seeing dinosaur fossils. Well, that would be a kind of a poor judgment, wouldn't it? Because there's no other evidence that such things as dinosaurs exist, but I could see your example. Kobe, catfishing people, that goes along with the internet example. That's a good one. Yeah, so catfishing someone, you have a false identity, you're trying to, like, I don't know, present yourself to, like, interested parties as, like, a possible romantic partner, and you're siphoning money and gifts out of them, but it's all used fake images and a fake identity, so their belief that this is this person I'm talking to would be justified but false. Okay, good example as well. All right, so examples abound, but I just wanted us to be able to clearly understand the point made here, that it is possible to have a justified false belief. It's not the ordinary case, but it's possible. Okay, now one more preliminary point, and this one is a little bit technical looking, and so it's just going to take me a moment to fully explain it to you, but bear with me, and never mind the fact that there are occasionally some things in it that are going to be a little confusing, but I'll break it down and bring it down to earth. Brandon, you say scientists believing that genetics worked a different way than it actually does before Mendel's discoveries. Yes. And, you know, there was all kinds of, like, have you ever heard of, like, the racist, old fake science of phrenology, where they thought, like, the size of the skull and the shape of the skull could have an effect on how intelligent a person was? And they used that because they thought that, like, you know, African-American subjects and stuff had, like, bigger heads and stuff. But later on they had to change that, because then they had the thought that brain size affects how intelligent you are, and that was running contradictory to phrenology. Anyway, yeah, all kinds of stuff in the past that we can point out. Eugenics, another case. Okay, so but two preliminaries. We had the one that it's possible to have a justified false belief, and here's the other one. It's called the closure principle, everybody. Now, the closure principle is a well-known principle of logic and epistemology, and let me write it out, and then I'll try to bring it down to earth. It says this: if some subject S, so S is just a label for a certain person. It could be me, you, or anybody. That's why we use S, because it's a variable that stands for whoever the case is. So if S is justified in believing a proposition P, okay, so we're labeling the proposition with the letter P because it could be any arbitrary example, like the sky is blue, Columbus sailed in 1492, my neighbor has a dog, you know, so to stand in for whatever the example is, we label it just with the placeholder P. If S is justified in believing P, and P entails another proposition Q, and S, the subject, deduces Q from P, then, in that case, if all these other conditions are met, then S, the subject, is also justified in believing Q. Okay, now I'm going to just kind of highlight some important pieces within the big concept here. So if S is justified in believing one statement P, and P entails a further statement Q, and the subject S deduces that statement Q from P, then in that case S is also justified in believing Q. Okay, so for us to fully comprehend this, we must examine the concept or the meaning of the word entailment. We need to learn, or remember anyway, what does entailment mean. So to entail something. Entailment is a logical relationship that holds between two propositions, when one proposition entails another one. So suppose the two propositions are labeled A and B. If A entails B, okay, let me write this up here. If A entails B, then if A is true, and I'm going to ask you, how do you think I'm going to complete that sentence? Think about the concept of entailment. If it's somewhere in the back of your mind, you've heard the word before, maybe you can comprehend or tell me what the sentence should say in the end. If A is a statement and it entails B, then in case A is true, what do we know about B? Since A entails B, the truth of A guarantees, yes, that B must also be true. If A entails B, then if A is true, B must also be true. Okay, so like for example, if you say I want to be a lawyer, but that entails that I have to go to law school, right? So do you understand that? It's like if A is I'm a lawyer, that being true means that it has to be true that you went to law school, because you can't be a lawyer if you never went to the law school. So A, I'm a lawyer, entails B, I attended law school. Just like you right now, you're a college student. Doesn't that entail that you attended high school? Yes, I would say. I mean, I don't know. Is there an example of a person that skipped right across it? Let's ignore that case for the moment because it's not helping my example. But, right, don't you figure that you being a student in this class entails that you went to high school? Or you being a student in this class, does that entail that that you were born? Yes or no? Let me know. Since you're a student in Philosophy 100, Spring 21, does that statement entail that you were born? Yes, it certainly does, because if you are a student, then you had to have been born. It's not possible for you to be a student and never born in the first place. But what about the other way around? Does the fact that you were born entail that you would be a student at Cal State Fullerton? Can you answer this? So you're born is A. Does that entail B, that you'll be a student at Cal State Fullerton? Well, you're answering, I hope, yes to the previous question. But let's now think about this new one. If I reverse them around, yeah, not necessarily, Kobe, of course, because just because you're born doesn't imply that you're going to attend one given school. It's a contingent fact that you're here. It's not necessarily guaranteed by your birth. But obviously, to be a student, you had to have been born. But you don't have to be a student just because you were born. Okay, so entailment, guys. Let me make sure it sinks in, and I'll give you another example. I was born in the 80s. That's just true. So I'm just telling you right now, and you can take it as a fact. Dr. Vulich was born in that decade, the 1980s. Can you tell me a statement that entails? Dr. Vulich was born in the 80s. Let that be A. What is something that has to be true based on that? Sure, Sebastian. Unless we're in a simulation and nothing is true, then all bets are off. We'll talk more about those concepts actually next meeting when we talk about Descartes. Fair enough. Yes, also Mark. But older than us. But Kobe, this is not necessarily true. You know, without further information, you do understand there are college students that go back to college in their 50s, 60s, and so on. So this is not quite good. No. Try again. I'm born in the 80s. Something that has to be true, not may be true, not could be true, or in all probability, but like logically, it's guaranteed that the second thing is true. So if I'm born in the 80s, well, Kobe, I don't know when you're born. So you have to add facts. You'd have to say, okay, Dr. Vulich was born in the 80s, I was born in the 2000s, and that conjunction statement entails that he's older than me. Yes, I see what you mean. But you had to add a whole other proposition. You had to add the second statement that you were born in 2001. So the form of your case is this: Vulich born in the 80s, I born in the 2000s. That big statement entails B, what you gave, that I am older than you. But me being older than you is not guaranteed merely by I was born in the 80s. You had to supply additional information about your birth date. So let's do something that doesn't require this supplying of new information, just a statement B. How about something that is entailed about me? I'm fishing around for this. I thought, you know, think of math, guys. If I was born in the 80s, what's something you know for a fact about me, for example? But Kobe, I don't want to make you think your example is wrong. It's just that it requires additional facts, and I was trying to just keep it streamlined. So let's see if we can get this out there. I was born in the 80s. Therefore, what's something that has to entail? It entails like infinitely many things, but I was hoping you might think of numbers. Okay, good, Brandon. That's true. Don't I have to be at least 30 years old if I was born in the 80s? We can all agree with that. That's true. Well, now, Kobe, your math is so off that I'm in my late 30s, early 40s. What decade is the 80s? It's 80 to 89. So you can't say 40. If I'm 40 right now, I would have had to be born in 1981 or 1980. I'm not 40. So there are people that are born in 1989 on like December 31st. Those people today are 30 years old, okay? Those people are, wait, let me get it right. They would have turned 30, 2019, December 31st. So those people are actually 31. So at a minimum, I'm in my 30s. That's what you can say safely. I can't be in my 20s still if I was born in the 80s. You understand? So if A is I was born in the 80s, then speaking today, 2021, I must be at a minimum 31 years old because there's no possible way. No, I just said the whole decade, but we're on the same page now, Kobe, so no problem. Anyway, I'm just trying to give you guys examples of entailment. I don't know, here's one example that my professor, when I was in grad school, gave me. If you're petting a dog, you'd be justified in the belief at that time that you're petting a dog, because you would feel the dog, you would see it with your eyes, so you'd have great evidence that you're petting a dog. Suppose that you're a fan of logic and you think this thought, hey, all dogs are mammals, and they are. So then you could deduce the second statement, I'm petting a dog, therefore it follows that I'm petting a mammal. That just is entailed by the first justified belief. So what this says then is the following. If you're already justified in believing one thing, and then you notice that it logically implies a second thing, in that case, you are also justified in believing the second statement because the justification from the first one transfers over to the second. Okay, so for right now, you guys are all justified in believing that I, your professor, was born in the 80s. What is your evidence? Well, because I told you myself. So you can say, he told me, and that's why I think so. So you're justified in that belief based on my testimony. Now, suppose you're a fan of the closure principle and you know a little math, and you're like, he says he's born in the 80s. Well, you know what? I'm deducing something. I have deduced that he's at least 30. Now, that second belief is also justified because the justification for A carries through to the second one, since A guarantees the second one to be true if it's true. So essentially, whatever evidence that you have which justifies an initial belief will also be sufficient to justify something furthermore that is entailed by it. So like, I know that you're a student in my class, so I'm fully justified in believing you're a college student because you're enrolled, you come to the class, and we interact. So if I believe that you're a college student, I have reason to believe that. Now suppose that I deduce from this that you graduated high school, because my thought is you can't possibly be in my class unless you're eligible to be a college student, meaning that you've already finished K through 12. So if I deduce that you graduated high school, I would be justified in believing that too, because it is entailed by the proposition that you're in my class. So the closure principle, I know it looks a little complex and wordy on a first glance, but guys, I'm trying to make it seem simpler, if I may. And what it really says in the end is something not too bad. It just says, if you have justification to believe one thing, then you're also going to be justified when you deduce something from it that follows from it logically. Okay, so the justification will carry through from the first proposition to the second if you deduce the second one from the first. Okay, so now we've covered these two preliminaries, and now we're actually finally ready to go through the Gettier cases. There are these two examples that Gettier provides in his essay, and the examples, like I said before, the attempt they're making is to show a person having a justified true belief, but still not having knowledge. And once again, that undermines the accuracy of the old school definition because it shows that you can meet all the conditions and still not have the defined concept of knowledge. Okay, so then, let's go on. Gettier case 1. And these cases are sometimes labeled with names to make them a little more memorable. I'm actually, I think, going to send you all a video too to kind of reinforce the lesson. There's some YouTube videos out there which have some helpful like animations and cartoons and stuff to make the discussion a little even easier to grasp. But here's Gettier's first case, which we can call Smith and Jones job hunt. Okay, so it's a hypothetical scenario, everyone. That's something that we're all familiar with by now. It's a commonplace within philosophy to use such scenarios to advance the understanding of an argument or some concepts. And as you probably know by now, it's not important to us whether these examples have any kind of realism or whether they're realistic. You know, if they're fanciful, strange, odd, bizarre, no problem. The point is just to illustrate a concept. And so let's go. Smith and Jones job hunt. There's a few characters in the scenario. Two of them are Smith and Jones. So here's Smith. Here's the other guy, Jones. Just to give you a little visual, I'm drawing them there. Now, what are Smith and Jones doing? There are two people that are applying for an open position in a company. And they're the two finalists for the position, but there's only one position open. So they're not both going to get the job. They're essentially competing against each other for this spot. And they're the finalists. So I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this type of interview situation, but in some cases where you have a big position to try and apply for, they will narrow down the field through several rounds of interviews, finally getting it down to 2 finalist candidates, and the boss or the hiring committee will choose between those last 2. And that's what this is with Smith and Jones. So one of them will be selected, not the other one. There's also the boss that does the interviews and makes the hiring decisions. So let me show you him. Here's the boss. I just wanted him to look different from Smith and Jones. I mean, these are all stick figures, so the big head, is just to kind of distinguish him from the 2 job applicants. Okay, now, in the scenario here, these 2 guys are competing for the job. They've conducted the interviews with the boss, and now they're just waiting for the final announcement of who gets this position. In the mind of Smith, he has a belief right now, and I'm going to show you the belief in a little thought bubble. So, because, when you believe something, sometimes you don't say it out loud, you just think it's true. Maybe that's the case with Smith here. So Smith has this belief. Okay, the belief of Smith is this. Jones, the other guy, will get the job. And there's a second part to his belief. Jones will get the job, and part 2, Jones, the other guy, has 10 coins in his pocket. Okay, so this is the belief that Smith has right now. He believes this proposition, so he thinks it's true. And Gettier says, let's label this with a letter to kind of just abbreviate and call this proposition D. So in parentheses, I'm putting letter D here to be associated with this belief of Smith. Smith believes that Jones will get the job and that Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. The next step is to tell you why Mr. Smith believes this. And it's not just random. He actually has pretty solid reasons for believing this. So first of all, why does he think Jones will get the job? I'll tell you. So after the interviews were over with, the boss had a moment aside with Smith. And maybe Jones stepped out, from the lobby to use the restroom or whatever. So for a brief moment, Smith and the boss are alone. And the boss kind of comes over to Smith and he says, hey, Smith, I just want to tell you something. Just kind of keep it on the down low for now. But to just let you know, I'm sorry to disappoint, but I've made my mind up. And I'm going to actually hire Jones instead of you. So I'm going with Jones. I think he's the better person for this position. He had a great interview, but I just like Jones. And so I'm going to go with him. But I don't want you to leave yet. Don't say anything because I want to make an official announcement, but I'm just giving you a heads up so that you know how this is going to go. Okay, so Smith's disappointed. Boss has just told him Jones is going to be hired. Boss leaves, and Jones comes back. So now it's Smith and Jones sitting in the lobby together, and what about the second part, that Jones has 10 coins in his pocket? Well, this part's pretty odd, okay? No way to get around it. Smith looks over at Jones, and he says, hey man, Jones, what's up? I have a question. Are you carrying any coins in your pocket right now? And Jones is like, yeah, actually, I have some coins in my pocket. Why? He's like, I don't know. I'm just curious. How many are there? How many coins are in your pocket, Jones? Smith's asking him. And Jones is like, I don't know. Do you want to count them? Smith's like, yes, actually, I do. So I will. So Smith counts the coins in Jones' pocket. Smith goes over, counts them. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, one more, 10. Okay, you got 10. Thanks, man. I'm sorry. I don't know. It's weird. It's random. But I just wanted to know that. So now I know. You got 10 coins in your pocket. So Smith believes this based on 2 pieces of evidence. Number 1, the boss told him privately, I'm going to hire Jones. And separate from that, Smith, counted the coins in Jones' pocket and saw that there were 10. So this is where we're going to pause for now. There's a little bit more. I'm going to keep you in suspense until Thursday. But if you haven't read this article yet, please do. It's very short. It's literally 2 pages. So it would take you 5 minutes or less to probably read it if you wanted to skim. And you can see how the case plays out. But we have a few steps left until we get to the results. So for now, anyways, I guess I'll let you guys go. But we'll pick up right at this point on Thursday's meeting and continue from there. Make sure to read the Gettier. And also, if you can, by Thursday, try to read the pages about Rene Descartes' Meditations. That's page 351 to 358. And we'll try to also start talking about it on Thursday. In the meantime, I'll be replying to all the emails I'm getting about grades on the midterm. Just be patient if you can. I'll certainly get to you within 2 days at the most. So anyway, then let me know that everything's cool and you're all good, and I'll close the stream once I see you guys say goodbye and all that. So let me know. Good to go? Okay, perfect. Thank you guys so much. Oh, hi, Danielle. Good to see you too. Not to worry, but It's always good to see you guys in the morning. So have a great one. Have a good couple of days, and I'll see you in a few. Thanks. Bye-bye.